Welcome to Learn English by Reading. Today, we have an inspiring story that will take you on a journey from feeling lost and invisible to becoming a confident leader. This is not just a story to enjoy, it is a story to learn from, to practice your English reading, listening, and speaking, and to discover how small steps can lead to big changes in life. Imagine standing alone in a busy street, surrounded by people who all seem to know where they are going, while you feel invisible and unsure of your own path. That is where our main character begins, facing doubt, fear, and loneliness. But through courage, discipline, and the guidance of a mentor, he finds a way forward. Along the way, you will see how he overcomes challenges, grows his confidence, and learns not only to change his own life, but also to help others. This story is perfect for English learners who want a calm, clear, and motivational narrative. You will hear simple, easy-to-follow English sentences, repeated phrases, and inspiring ideas that you can use in your own life. Pay attention to how the character speaks, how he faces fear, and how he grows step by step. It's a great way to practice understanding natural English and build your vocabulary and context. So stay with us until the end, listen carefully, and follow along. This is not just a story. It's a guide to learning, growing, and discovering your own potential. Let's begin the journey together and see how anyone can rise from being lost to becoming a leader. Chapter 1. Lost in the Crowd. The street was alive with noise. Cars pushed through the traffic, people hurried with bags in their hands, and children laughed as they ran past. Everyone seemed to know where they were going. Everyone had a direction. But in the middle of this busy crowd stood a young man named Leo, and he felt like he belonged nowhere. He watched people move with purpose, their faces sharp with focus, their steps quick and steady. In contrast, his own steps were heavy, uncertain, without aim. To others, he was just another figure in the street, a shadow among thousands. But inside, he felt smaller than even that. He felt invisible. Every morning for Leo began the same way. He would wake up in his small room, stare at the cracked ceiling, and wonder why he should get out of bed. His jobs came and went, washing dishes in one place, carrying boxes in another. The money was always too little, the work always too temporary. He wanted stability, but life seemed to push him from one corner to another, like a leaf caught in the wind. The world outside moved quickly, but Leo's life was stuck in slow motion. His friends from childhood had found paths of their own, studying at university, building careers, starting families. When he saw their smiling photos on social media, he felt a quiet ache. They were moving ahead, but he was standing still. He tried not to compare himself, but the thought returned again and again. Why can't I find my way? Sometimes he would sit in a tea shop, listening to conversations around him. People talked about dreams, opportunities, and plans for the future. Leo sat silently, stirring his cup of tea, pretending to be part of the noise while feeling completely apart from it. It was not that he didn't want a better life. He did. But his mind was heavy with doubt. He didn't know where to begin. He didn't believe he had the skills, the knowledge, or the courage. Yet buried deep inside him, there was a small flame that never went out. It was weak, almost invisible, but it whispered, "Maybe there is more. Maybe life can change." Still, that whisper was drowned by the louder voice of fear. Fear told him he was too late, too unprepared. too ordinary. And so, most days, Leo chose silence. He walked with his head down, careful not to attract attention, careful not to reveal how lost he truly felt. One evening, as he stood at a busy crossroads, the city lights painted the road in gold. People crossed quickly, chasing buses, answering phones, living lives that seemed full of motion. Leo stood still, unable to move, his heart heavy in his chest. The contrast between the rushing world and his own emptiness felt sharper than ever before. In that moment, surrounded by strangers, he felt the weight of his life pressing down on him. A thought rose inside, quiet but painful, the kind of question that cannot be ignored. Is this all my life will ever be? Chapter 2. The Breaking Point. The night was dark and heavy with rain. Leo walked slowly through the narrow streets, his clothes soaked, his shoes splashing in shallow puddles. Just hours earlier, he had been told once again, "We don't need you anymore." Another job lost. Another door closed. The words echoed in his mind as the rain tapped against his face, each drop mixing with the weight he already carried inside. He kept his head down, ashamed to meet the eyes of strangers passing by. He imagined what they might see. A young man without direction, a worker who could not keep even the simplest jobs. Each step toward home felt longer than the last, as if the road stretched on endlessly to remind him of his failures. The rain was cold, but inside, his heart felt colder still. When Leo finally reached his small house, the dim light of the kitchen flickered through the window. He pushed open the door quietly, hoping to slip into his room unseen. But before he could, voices reached his ears. His younger brother and sister were talking in hushed tones, not knowing he was near. "He can't keep any job," his brother whispered. "Maybe he really is a failure." The words pierced Leo's chest like a blade. His sister sighed. "I feel sorry for him, but I don't think he'll ever change." For a moment, Leo froze. His breath caught in his throat, and his eyes stung with something hotter than rainwater. He had always known what people might think of him, but hearing it from his own family was unbearable. The voices of strangers could be ignored, but the voices of those closest to him. Those words settled deep into his soul. He stepped back into the shadows, silent, unseen. His hands trembled slightly, not from the rain, but from the storm rising inside him. Until now, he had carried sadness, hopelessness, and fear. But at that moment, something new began to grow, something fierce, something burning. It was anger, yes, but not the kind that destroys. It was anger at himself, at the wasted days, at the endless excuses he had made. It was a cry inside that refused to be silent any longer. He thought of every rejection, every failure, every time he had told himself he was not good enough. And then he thought of the future that awaited if he did nothing. A future of the same pain, the same shame, the same empty nights. The thought was unbearable. Leo sat on the edge of his bed, staring into the darkness of his small room. His wet clothes clung to his skin, but he barely noticed. The rain outside had stopped, but inside him, a storm was raging. He knew something had to change. The pain he felt tonight was too great to ignore, and perhaps, he thought, pain could be the fire that pushed him forward. With a deep breath, he whispered into the silence, his voice firm though quiet. "I must change. I cannot stay lost." Chapter 3. A Small Step Forward. The next morning, Leo woke up with the echo of his own words still in his mind. I must change. But how? He had no plan, no guide, no clear path to follow. The thought of becoming someone different felt impossible, like trying to climb a mountain without even knowing where the trail began. Still, he knew he could not remain the same. If he did nothing, nothing would change. That afternoon, his steps led him to a place he had not visited in years, the local library. It was an old building with tall wooden doors and windows that smelled faintly of dust and paper. Inside, rows of books stretched out like a forest of knowledge. The quiet air felt heavy, but also strangely comforting, as though it was inviting him to discover something new. Leo wandered between the shelves, his fingers brushing against the spines of books. Titles about history, science, and stories from faraway lands called to him, but one book caught his eye more than the rest. On the cover were the words, "Small Habits, Big Change." He pulled it down carefully and held it close, almost afraid that someone might take it away. When he opened the book, his eyes struggled to follow the sentences. Some words were unfamiliar, difficult, slippery in his mind. His English was not strong, and for a moment, frustration filled him. He thought of putting the book back, of walking away. But then he remembered the voices of his siblings, the sting of their words, and the fire that had risen inside him. He could not give up now. So he sat at a table near the window, the afternoon light falling across the pages, and began to read slowly. Every time he found a word he did not know, he underlined it with the small pencil he carried. Sometimes he guessed its meaning, sometimes he checked the dictionary kept on the library desk. The progress was slow, painfully slow, but with every sentence he understood, he felt a spark of pride. 1 page turned into 2, 2 into 10. Hours passed without him noticing. The world outside continued its busy rush, but Leo was lost in something new, a quiet battle against his own limits. It was not easy. His head ached from concentrating, his eyes grew tired, and doubt whispered that he was too slow, too late. But another voice whispered louder, "This is the way forward. Keep going." By the time he closed the book that evening, his heart felt lighter than it had in months. He had not changed the world. He had not won a grand victory. But he had taken a step, a small, steady step. For the first time, he realized that change did not need to happen all at once. It could begin here, with a single page, a single word, a single act of effort. Walking home that night, Leo's lips curved into a quiet smile. It was the first smile in months, and it carried a promise. He had found a path, and though it was small, it was his. Learning could be the way forward. Chapter 4. A Mentor Appears. Day after day, Leo returned to the library. He would sit by the same window, open his borrowed book, and struggle with the words. Sometimes the letters blurred before his eyes. Sometimes frustration pressed heavily against his chest. Yet still, he kept turning the pages. He was slow, but he was steady. It was during one of these long afternoons that an older man paused by his table. His hair was gray, his glasses rested lightly on his nose, and his kind eyes seemed to notice more than most people saw. He watched quietly for a moment as Leo scribbled notes in the margins of his notebook, then said softly, "You come here often, don't you?" Leo looked up, a little startled. "Yes, sir," he replied shyly. His voice was unsure, almost apologetic, as though he had been caught doing something wrong. The man smiled. "That is good. My name is Ravi. I used to teach English here many years ago. I see determination in you. Most people do not spend so much time wrestling with words unless they truly want to learn." Something stirred in Leo at those words. Determination? No one had ever said that about him before. Usually people spoke only of his failures. He lowered his eyes and said quietly, "I am trying, but it feels so hard. Sometimes I think I am too slow." Mr. Ravi pulled out the chair across from him and sat down. "Slow is not failure," he said gently. "Slow is steady. Steady is strength. What matters is that you do not stop." His voice was calm, carrying the weight of someone who had seen many students struggle and rise. From that day, Mr. Ravi began to guide Leo. He didn't give him shortcuts, and he didn't make the path easy. Instead, he offered encouragement and simple advice that Leo carried like treasures. "Discipline will be your strength," he often reminded him. "Even 10 minutes of honest practice every day will change your life more than 100 hours of empty wishing." Under Ravi's watchful eye, Leo began to practice not only reading, but also speaking. At first, his words stumbled awkwardly. His tongue felt heavy, his sentences broken. He was embarrassed, afraid of sounding foolish. But Ravi listened patiently, correcting gently, never laughing, never judging. With each practice, Leo's voice grew steadier, his confidence slowly rising like a fragile plant reaching toward the sun. For the first time in his life, Leo felt he had someone who believed in him. He was no longer just a nameless figure lost in the crowd. He was a learner, a student, a young man whose efforts mattered to someone else. As weeks passed, the library no longer felt like a silent hall of books. It became a place of growth, a place of connection. And one evening, as Leo packed his notebook into his bag, he realized something powerful. He was no longer walking this journey alone. Chapter 5. Facing the First Test. One afternoon, as Leo and Mr. Ravi were leaving the library, a notice caught their attention. It was pinned to the community board. Volunteers needed to organize a youth reading group. The words seemed to glow on the paper, pulling Leo's eyes toward them. Ravi read it quietly, then turned to Leo with a thoughtful smile. "You should try," he said simply. Leo's heart skipped. "Me? No, I can't. My English is not good enough. People will laugh at me." His voice was quick, almost defensive. The thought of standing in front of others, guiding them, felt terrifying. But Ravi shook his head. Leadership is not about being perfect. It is about serving others, even when you feel small. You have been learning with discipline. Why not share it? Sometimes courage is nothing more than taking the first step. That night, Leo lay awake, staring at the ceiling. His mind was a battlefield. One voice whispered, "You will embarrass yourself. They will only remember your failures." Another voice, quieter but firm, answered, "If you never try, you will remain the same." The conflict twisted inside him until finally, with a deep breath, he decided he would apply. Chapter 6. The Climb of Confidence. The weeks that followed were unlike any Leo had ever known. For the first time in years, his mornings had purpose. He set his alarm before sunrise, forcing himself out of bed while the village was still quiet. In the dim light, He stood in front of a cracked mirror, practicing English phrases. At first, the words felt heavy, refusing to roll off his tongue, but day after day he tried again, repeating sentences, correcting himself, pushing through the awkwardness. The library became his second home. Leo borrowed books on communication, discipline, and self-improvement, underlining lines that spoke to him. When the youth reading group gathered, he shared not only what he had learned, but also his own struggles. His honesty made others trust him. Slowly, the group grew. Young boys and girls came not just to read, but to listen to him. Each session, Leo felt his voice grow steadier, his confidence stronger. But growth was never free of pain. On the streets of the village, some neighbors whispered when he passed. "Look at him," one said. "Playing leader, pretending to be smart." Another chuckled. "He can't even speak English well, and yet he teaches others?" What a joke. The words cut deeply, reopening old wounds of shame. Some nights, after hearing such comments, Leo sat alone and wondered if they were right. Maybe he was pretending. Maybe he was just fooling himself. The doubt pressed heavily on his chest, threatening to undo all the progress he had made. Yet, in those moments of weakness, he remembered the faces of the young people in his group. He remembered the way they leaned forward when he spoke, the way their eyes brightened when they learned something new. He remembered the small boy who once told him, "Sir, I read my first book because of you." Those moments reminded him that leadership was not about being perfect. It was about lifting others, even while still climbing himself. So Leo made a decision. Instead of giving weight to the laughter of those who doubted him, he would give weight to the hope of those who believed in him. Every insult became fuel. Every smirk pushed him to stand taller, speak clearer, and study harder. He began to see criticism not as a chain, but as a challenge. The climb was slow, but steady. His reading sessions became smoother. His morning practices grew longer. His mistakes, once a source of shame, became lessons he proudly carried forward. With each step, Leo felt himself becoming someone new, someone stronger, more resilient, more determined. One evening, after another day of teaching, he stood alone beneath the fading sky. The voices of doubt still echoed in his mind, but this time they no longer shook him. Looking out at the horizon, he whispered firmly to himself, "I will not be discouraged anymore, no matter what others say." Chapter 7. The Big Challenge. The invitation arrived on a bright morning, pinned to the community board with a bold headline, "Youth Leadership Event, Speakers Needed." Leo's hands trembled as he read it. They wanted him to speak in front of hundreds of people. Hundreds. The thought made his stomach twist. Fear, old and familiar, crawled back into his chest. The boy who had once been invisible, the lost one in the streets, was now being asked to stand where everyone could see him. That night, Leo lay awake in his small room, staring at the ceiling. The walls seemed to close in as memories of failure crowded his mind. He remembered every job he had lost, every night he had walked alone in the rain, every whisper of doubt he had heard from others and from himself. The fear was paralyzing. His heart raced as if it wanted to escape. Thoughts circled endlessly. What if I fail? What if they laugh? What if I am still the same lost boy? Hours passed without sleep. The rain tapped softly against the window, but it felt louder than ever, echoing the storm in his mind. Yet, even amidst the fear, another voice spoke softly. the voice he had learned to trust, Ravi's calm words from months ago. Discipline will be your strength. Courage is taking the first step. He remembered the mornings of practice in front of the mirror, the nights of reading, the slow victories in the library. Every small effort he had made had been a step toward this moment. Leo sat up and ran his hands through his hair. The fear had not vanished, but now it carried a different weight. It was no longer just a chain, it was a challenge. He could let it crush him, or he could let it push him forward. He remembered the young faces in the reading group, how they had looked at him with trust, their eyes full of hope. Could he let them down? Could he let himself down? The next morning, Leo dressed carefully, his heart hammering with every step toward the town hall. The streets felt narrower, the crowd thicker. People moved around him, but he barely noticed them. His mind was a whirlwind of fear and anticipation. Inside the hall, hundreds of people filled the chairs. He could hear whispers, small coughs, the scraping of chairs against the floor. All eyes would be on him soon. He stood behind the stage curtains, gripping the edge with both hands. His mouth felt dry, his knees weak. His chest rose and fell rapidly, each breath a reminder that he was alive, that this moment was real. Leo closed his eyes for a moment, remembering everything that had brought him here. The lonely streets, the rainy nights, the library books, the encouraging voice of Mr. Ravi. All of it had led to this single step. Taking a deep breath, he pushed the curtain aside. The bright lights hit him, and hundreds of eyes turned his way. His heart pounded violently in his chest. Every fear was present, but so was every small victory he had earned. With his first step onto the stage, Leo felt the weight of the moment, but also a glimmer of something new, a fragile, powerful hope. Chapter 8. Voice of a Leader. Leo stood at the center of the stage, the bright lights warming his face, the eyes of hundreds of people fixed on him. His throat felt tight, and his hands trembled slightly. For a moment, he wanted to run, to disappear into the shadows where he had once hidden. But he remembered the long nights of practice, the hours of reading, and Mr. Ravi's calm voice. Courage is taking the first step. He cleared his throat and spoke. At first, his voice wavered, breaking with the weight of fear. Words stumbled awkwardly, sentences were uneven, and he could hear the faint rustle of the audience shifting in their seats. The familiar fear of failure rose like a tide, threatening to sweep him away. For a moment, he froze, unsure if he could continue. Then, Leo took a deep breath. He thought of the rainy nights, the empty streets, the library where he had struggled with every new word. He thought of the young faces in his reading group, full of hope, waiting to hear him speak. And he thought of every time he had whispered to himself, "I must change." That thought gave him strength. Slowly, his voice steadied, each word flowing clearer, firmer, filled with heart. He began to tell his story. He spoke of the boy who once felt invisible, lost in the busy streets of the village. He shared his nights of doubt, the failures, the fear of not being good enough. He described the small steps he had taken, the books he had read, the practice in front of the mirror, and the guidance of a mentor who believed in him. He did not hide his struggles. He embraced them, showing that even the lost could rise. The room grew quiet. No one whispered. No one shifted. Every pair of eyes remained on him, listening. For the first time, Leo understood the power of truth and courage. He realized that people did not expect perfection. They wanted honesty, effort, and heart. As he spoke, he felt a growing connection with the audience, an invisible bridge forming between his story and their own hopes. By the end, a silence hung for a brief, perfect moment. Then the room erupted in applause. Hands clapped, smiles appeared, and some people who had once doubted him now looked with admiration. Some even rose to their feet. The sound was overwhelming, but it was not just applause. It was recognition. Recognition of effort, courage, and transformation. Leo felt something shift inside him. He was no longer the lost boy from the streets. He was someone who had fought fear, embraced learning, and stood in front of others to share his journey. A leader, not because he commanded, but because he inspired. As the clapping continued, Leo stood taller. His chest swelled with quiet pride. For the first time in his life, he felt he truly belonged, not just on the stage, but in the world, in his own life. The fear that had once held him captive now seemed small, distant, almost powerless against the voice he had found within himself. Chapter 9. Giving Back. After the applause of the town event faded from his mind, Leo realized that the journey he had taken was not only about finding himself, it was about discovering something larger than fear or ambition. It was about helping others rise. The boy who had once walked invisible through crowded streets now felt a responsibility he had never known. One morning, Leo gathered a few young children under the shade of the old banyan tree in the village square. He spoke gently, introducing himself and explaining that they could learn English together, just as he had. Some children were shy, some curious, and a few giggled quietly, unsure of what to expect. But Leo remembered the nervous, trembling moments of his own first steps. He knew patience and encouragement could turn fear into hope. The lessons began slowly. Leo started with simple words, phrases, and short stories. He watched their faces light up when they understood something new. Their questions reminded him of his own struggles, and he answered each one with care, never rushing, never judging. When a child stumbled over pronunciation, he would smile and gently guide them, repeating the words together until confidence grew. As the weeks passed, the small group expanded. Children brought friends, and parents began to notice. Slowly, the whispers of doubt that had once followed Leo were replaced with words of respect. People began calling him teacher or sir, not out of formality, but from admiration for the way he shared knowledge and kindness. The village had started to see him as someone who lifted others, a leader in action rather than title. Yet, Leo never forgot the fear and loneliness he had once carried. Every lesson he taught was guided by that memory. He understood what it meant to feel small, invisible, and hopeless. It made him patient, compassionate, and careful to celebrate every small victory his students achieved. He was not creating followers, but helping them find their own strength, just as Ravi had done for him. Evenings were often quiet moments of reflection. Leo would walk home under the dim glow of streetlights, thinking about the journey from lost boy to mentor. He felt the weight of responsibility, but it was a different weight now, one that inspired rather than crushed. He had discovered that leadership was not about power or fame or recognition. True leadership was measured in the impact one had on others, the courage to guide, and the heart to serve. Looking at the children laughing over their books, he felt a warm sense of fulfillment. The streets that once echoed with his loneliness now carried voices of curiosity and hope. And in that moment, Leo understood something deeply simple, yet profoundly true. His journey had come full circle. The boy who had once been lost now helped others find their way. And in giving back, he discovered a joy and purpose far greater than anything he could have imagined for himself. Chapter 10. From Lost to Leader. Leo stood at the edge of the village square, watching the sun set over the small rooftops and winding streets. The golden light touched every corner, painting the world in warmth and quiet hope. He closed his eyes for a moment and let memories sweep over him. The lonely nights, the cold rain, the fear that had wrapped around his heart like chains. He remembered walking through busy streets, invisible to everyone, wondering if he would ever matter, ever find a way forward. He remembered the sting of words spoken by his own siblings, the shame of failing at job after job, the constant whisper of doubt in his mind. The boy he had once been felt almost like another person, a shadow of someone lost, wandering without direction, carrying a heavy heart full of uncertainty. It had been a life of quiet despair, measured in small defeats and empty mornings. And yet, here he was now. The library where he had once struggled with English words had become a place of knowledge, growth, and connection. The youth reading group he had led now thrived under his guidance. Children laughed as they read, eager to learn, encouraged by someone who had once known fear and failure. People in the village looked to him not as a boy who had stumbled, but as a mentor, a teacher, a source of inspiration. Respect had replaced doubt. Hope had replaced shame, and courage had replaced fear. Leo smiled as he thought of Mr. Ravi, whose calm encouragement had been the spark that lit the fire inside him. The guidance, the small lessons, the patience, they had taught him more than words could describe. But ultimately, it had been his own determination, the countless early mornings, the mistakes corrected, and the fear faced again and again that had carried him to this moment. Every step, no matter how small, had mattered. Every struggle had shaped him. He looked at the children gathering their books, chattering excitedly about the stories they had read that day. A wave of gratitude washed over him. He had become someone who could lift others, guide them, and show them the way he had once sought so desperately. Leadership, he realized, was not about power or recognition. It was about service, patience, and the courage to keep moving forward despite fear. The contrast between then and now felt astonishing. From a boy who felt invisible, he had grown into a young man who was seen, heard, and trusted. From a life of despair, he had built a life of purpose. From being lost, he had become a leader. Leo took a deep breath, letting the moment sink in. He knew the journey was not over. There would always be challenges, doubts, and new mountains to climb. But he also knew this: anyone, no matter how lost they feel today, can grow into a leader. With courage, patience, learning, and the willingness to take the first step, transformation is possible. Turning toward the children, toward the village, and toward the endless possibilities ahead, Leo smiled once more. His voice, quiet but certain, carried a message not just for them, but for everyone who listened. Your journey may be slow, but step by step, you too can rise, from lost to leader. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey from being lost to becoming a leader. We hope you felt inspired by Leo's story and that it encouraged you to take small steps in your own life, whether it's learning English, building confidence, or helping others. Remember, every step you take matters, and even small efforts can create big change over time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to practice reading, listening, and speaking along with it. Try repeating the sentences, saying the phrases out loud, and thinking about how the lessons from Leo's journey can apply to your own life. Motivation grows stronger when you take action, and English improves faster when you actively practice every day. We upload new videos every single day, full of inspiring stories, practical lessons, and clear English learning opportunities. By following our channel, you can make learning a daily habit and discover how stories like this one can improve your language skills and help you grow personally. So make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story or lesson. Share it with friends who also want to learn English and find motivation in their own journey. Always remember, no matter where you start, with courage, patience, and consistent effort, you can grow, improve, and step into your own potential. Keep learning, keep growing, and we will see you in the next story tomorrow.